it's good to have that collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
It's great to have a broker who's really there for you and is accessible. I know there are some situations where the actual broker of the brokerage isn't here or is accessible. I think that's vitally important.
Hey, welcome back to the Real Estate Excellence Podcast, where we highlight the leaders, innovators, and top producers shaping the future of real estate in Northeast Florida. Today's guest brings a level of professionalism, community leadership, and marketing acumen that few in the industry can match. With a background in broadcast, print, and digital media, she led campaigns and built strategic partnerships for names like Jacksonville Business Journal and First Coast News. She's a graduate of the Gallup Leadership Institute, a seasonal small business owner, and even spent time in commercial construction with Gilbane, bringing a 360-degree understanding of the business, branding, and service into her real estate career. Now a proud part of the Berkshire Hathaway HomeServices Florida Network Realty, she's helping families and businesses navigate one of Florida's most competitive markets while remaining deeply involved in civic and nonprofit organizations across the region. Joining me today is Kimberly Waterhouse, a marketing powerhouse, community connector, and dedicated real estate professional committed to helping others love where they live, work, and play. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
I appreciate you coming down today. So I was messaging you last night to get your bio done. Well, I didn't have time. I said, I got to get this done because I hate to come in the morning and try to scramble, getting ready for the show. So I went into your other websites, LinkedIn and what you have actually on the Berkshire Hathaway Florida Network Realty site, and pulled those bios off and uploaded them to ChatGPT. And of course, it knows my show very well because I upload every transcript to it, and so knows, and that's how it created that bio there for you. So,
all right,
yeah.
It missed one important part, though.
It did miss the Marine Corps. I assume that's where you were letting, as you are a
Yes.
veteran of the United States Marines. Once a Marine, always a Marine. And my father's a Marine. Much back, he spent most of his 4-year enlistment at 8th and I, and was there during the Kennedy administration.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the story goes, the Bay of Pigs was going down as his enlistment was coming up. And they were going to hold him over, and then obviously that didn't last very long, and then they let him go ahead and move on. Yeah. But yeah.
I spent my entire enlistment at Camp Pendleton, California. Lived in Carlsbad, and so that was the early 80s, and that was a great time to be in California. Getting ready to fly into San Diego next week. So we're going to tool around a little bit before we head over to Yuma, Arizona for a family visit. And so I'm excited to see everything. I'm trying to get back on the base so I could go visit where I worked. Don't know if that's going to happen, but it was a great time to be in California.
Yeah. So what was your occupancy as a Marine? What would they have you doing at Pendleton that whole time?
My MOS.
Yeah, MOS, right. I knew, I was trying to,
Which stands for those that are non-military, military occupation
Occupational
specialty. I was operations. I was in the S3. This is very long. So I was stationed at Headquarters and Service Company, Schools Battalion, Camp Dilmar, Camp Pendleton, California. And as most people would say, we were the closest to the Oceanside Gate to civilization, and we could see the Pacific Ocean from certain parts of Camp Dilmar because Camp Pendleton is the largest military installation, and it can take you hours to get from one point to another. It's beautiful there, but it's huge. So I did that in between going to college and finishing college.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
All right. So, as I always kick off each show, though, but where are you actually from?
Jacksonville.
You're from Jacksonville.
I'm a native. Yes.
Well, I know Tom was just in here and asked you what high school you went to. As I imagine you make this decision to go in the Corps or not. You're like 17, 18 years old at the time. What makes you choose to?
Well, I was actually
enlist?
supposed to go in the Air Force. So I went to college for a year and a half. wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I know this sounds strange, and for you parents out there,
Doesn't sound strange. That's every kid in the United States.
I felt like I was wasting my parents' money
Yeah.
because it was like, so I sat out for a year, and then I was ready to go back to college. Financially, that wasn't in the cards at that point. And so
So you're about 20 now, give or take.
How old was I? I was 19. Well, how old was I?
You said you went for a year and a half, and then you...
20.
Yeah,
I was 20. Mm-hmm. And actually 19, turned 20 because my birthday's later in the year. And I was supposed to go into the Air Force, and they had a wait. And I got a call from a recruiter, a Marine Corps recruiter, and went in with my parents. He lied a lot, but that's okay. And I went into the United States Marine Corps, went through boot camp at Parris Island, mm-hmm. and they were just starting to integrate the male training into the female training. So at one point in my life, I always go like this because I'm visual, like a transformer. I could put together and take apart an M16A1 rifle. Mm-hmm. Had to learn to shoot it, throw a grenade, go through a lot of stuff. Marched out in full cami boots, helmets with an 80-pound pack and my M16A1 rifle out into the field. Had to dig my own latrine, pitch my own shelter half, do all of that.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds crazy, but I did that. Mm-hmm. So I learned a lot about myself. I definitely learned a lot about other people. Very interesting time.
There's one, having grown up with a Marine, and then I went to the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina, which today is one of the highest ranking ROTC colleges out mm-hmm. there, and the amount of Marines that are actually put out, and that's actually led by the former assistant commandant as the president of the Citadel, which is a Citadel mm-hmm. grad, General Walters, 4-star. And anyway, what I've always found about Marines is they're very humble. And for the most part, I don't know if confident is the word, but like when you talked about, you learned about other people, they understand what they went through at Parris mm-hmm. Island or, in California, Pendleton out there, just that they're driving a totally different road. And I think they're just so unique in the four, between the Navy, Air Force, and the Army. The Marine Corps is kind of unique in that way. It's just something that I've caught hanging around with Marines. They just, they tolerate other people being stupid and so forth. They don't they know that they have gone somewhere that others haven't, mm-hmm. But they don't have to talk about it. It's just something, I don't know, that I've always, perception that I've always picked up from them.
Well, it's interesting because in my previous professional chapters, I never really talked about being in the military. Mm-hmm. And as you saw in my bio, I spent 18 years with the Jacksonville Business Journal. So, this is really before LinkedIn was a big thing and you could go in and learn about somebody. And if I were in a meeting, especially in a C-suite situation, I'd scan a room and see if there was something I could pick up on to start a conversation. Mm. And I remember the first time this happened, I saw the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. And I could tell with the other items around it, he was an officer in the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. So
was he wearing because he's wearing civilian clothes, right? In your meeting?
You could see just different things like pictures and so forth.
Okay.
And so I said, "Oh, you and I have something in common." Mm. He's like looking at me like, "What?" And I pointed over, and he's like turning around. He's like, "What are you pointing at?" And I said, "The Marine Corps." And he's like, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "I served in the Marine Corps." And that changed the whole conversation.
Yeah.
So I started talking about it more. I put it on my business cards. And when it pertains to real estate, one of the first designations that was important for me to get after my license and so forth was my military relocation professional designation, MRP. And to really understand that, I bought a house on my own as a professional single female, and I used my VA loan. And we're going down a different rabbit hole here, Tracy. So, back then, and that was the late 90s, a VA loan was 8%. And typically a VA and an FHA loan is a lower percentage than a 30-year.
Because the government is
yeah.
backing it in one way, shape, or form, differently in the two, but yeah.
Well, and it's also interesting, too, because you don't have to put money down and other things, but I just feel like I've learned so much more, and I would have done that financing the way it was set up a lot differently. But that's okay. You learn. And so, yeah, but, you know, I heard a statistic recently, and I don't know if it's true, but it's astounding to me that there's like in the 70 percentile of veterans have never used this right. They haven't used their VA.
When I started in the mortgage business in 2005 with then Quicken Loans, now Rocket, they didn't even do FHA and VA loans. We had all this other alternative lending going on. It wasn't a thing. And it wasn't really until, you know, the collapse of 7 and 8, and all of a sudden, you know, all those kind of alternative type lending things went away, and now a demand for FHA and the VA. And then, you know, today, which I think majority, if not all, of our service members who are leaving the service are leaving with some sort of disability. It might only be 10%, maybe for hearing or something like that, but they're getting that disability, which now they're not having to pay the funding fee.
Right.
I don't think you had that for even guys that got back from Vietnam.
Right.
I don't think many of them were getting some form of disability, and therefore exempting them from the funding fee, which would then be a reason not to do it. And, you know, I've talked to other veterans, and you probably will agree with it. Today, they actually are teaching them as they're going through their stages of, you know, discharge. Deprocessing, right. But you probably never were actually educated while you were actually in the service.
No, I wasn't. And there's a lot, I think, you know, going through that deprocessing. And again, going back to the fact I was on Camp Pendleton, going through that, I saw parts of that base that I never had a reason to go to. It was pretty wild. But no, and I think there's a lot of things that they may do better now. I don't know, but I knew nothing about it. And, you know, do I know everything? No. But I know enough that if I find out somebody is a veteran and they've never used that VA loan, let's talk about it. And because we are in a region that's heavy military, and it's one of the duty stations that if somebody has served here, they want to come back. This is where they want to live as a veteran.
Yeah.
You know, we have right over the Florida line, you've got Kings Bay substation. A lot of those folks want to live in Florida. You know, they can live in Nassau County, North Jacksonville. But just understanding having enough information that you can tell, you know, even with a seller, please, you know, there's nothing wrong with accepting a VA loan. And here are the things that you have to look at. It's just like working, you know, and we'll skip over here to working with sellers, is I always suggest and highly recommend doing a pre-listing inspection. I've only been told no once by a seller. And I was fine with that.
I'm a big pre-listing inspection person,
he had
supporter.
A book. He had a book. He knew everything. And I was like, okay, we're good here. Because, you know, in today's environment, especially with insurance, you got to get some of these things out of the way because you're not going to be able to get insurance. Yeah, sure, there's citizens, but, you know, that doesn't guarantee that they're going to get citizens coverage. Because, you know, they typically show up at your house and go through stuff and find something, and that's a whole nother conversation. But, yeah, I mean, you have to, and if you're not, then you price your house accordingly, you disclose, and so...
Well, I don't want to mix because we were talking about the VA loan, and then you went into the pre-listing inspection. I thought you were going somewhere, but maybe I can bring this back around.
It home.
I think for the most part, agents that are savvy enough and understand, obviously you do, there's nothing special about a VA home appraisal. Now, to be a VA home appraiser, you have to you are the best of the best, and they're under very strict guidelines from the VA.
Right.
Agents, for whatever period of time, There's still some out there, but I think they're slowly fading on about how, oh my God, yeah, don't want a VA loan because they'll see some water damage. They're going to see water damage no matter what loan you're
Exactly.
doing. I don't know anyone buying a home today that isn't paying for a home inspection before they just ultimately sign the line, right? So if there's water damage, the understanding that a VA appraiser is not crawling in the attic like an inspector, but if they see water damage, they're going to say, hey, there's water damage. They're going to do that on that VA loan as well as just that regular conforming loan or FHA. They're going to say, hey, we saw water damage. You might want to look. There might be a leak in the ceiling, whatever it is, or the roof or whatever. So I don't want to say, but...
And WDO.
But what they see. So if you can see it, they can see it,
right.
Type of thing. But I think the important thing is I think we're slowly closing that gap that where agents are in some sellers are miseducated on the VA loan. It's the best loan out there. If you've got a veteran buying your home, trust me, it's the most forgiving. It has more likely chance to close than any other loan that they have.
Oh, yeah.
And
there's a lot you can do with a VA loan, and you can have more than one, and you can assume a VA.
Yeah.
Like, there's a listing out there. I'm actually showing it tonight where I about fell out when I read the language. It started off, less than 3% assumable VA loan. I was like, oh, okay. Called the listing agent. I said, well, how much is it? She goes, 2.75. And I was like,
lovely.
Yeah. And you just have to know, you have to find out who that lender is, how much they have left on the loan itself, and, get hooked up with the right lender that understands that.
Just so those are listening out there, this is actually very important, especially right now. Now, obviously, they've got to come up with that money between what is actually owed on the current mortgage and then what's the value of the home, because someone's going to give away tens of thousands of dollars in equity.
Right.
But there are lenders that are starting to bring in that second to meet that gap where maybe they only have to put 5 or 10% down, but by assuming a 2.75 a loan, I mean, yeah, the second may be a little bit higher in interest rate, but we're talking, I mean, hundreds of dollars in housing expense savings by capturing that lower rate and assuming that. So you definitely want to pursue, again, have the lenders in your Rolodex who can fill that second. Can I get $100,000 second, or whatever that gap is there, because it can be beneficial to you. I want to also listen, since this is something I was actually just talking about it yesterday with an agent. You like pre-listing inspections. I think it's brilliant. I think, to go in, and especially now when there's so much inventory, but even back when people were, and you went through this, you saw this in 21 and 22, where people were going out and putting an offer on a home. It wasn't really the home they wanted, but because there was really a lot of other choices. And then the home they think they really wanted came up, and they would try to cancel the contract on the home they were in, right? Because the inventory was low. Now there's a lot of inventory, but buyers will find they always have buyer's remorse whenever it settles in, whether it's 15 minutes after signing the contract or a couple of days. They have reasons to get out. And if you've done a pre-listing inspection and done all the things, that eliminates a lot of the little excuses they have, or buyer's remorse opportunities for them to escape.
Well, and also, wouldn't you rather know that these things are here, fix them, so that when you do go under contract, those aren't the big, oh my goodnesses, and I'm walking away, then we got to put your house back on the market.
And then they're negotiating dollars.
And on. I mean, there's a lot of negotiating going on now. I mean, I think the average on an existing home and concessions ranges between $8,000 and about $9,000. You've got different types of financing. We were talking about that earlier, that sellers can help to, especially with a first-time home buyer, help them get into a house. And, I remember my CPA asked me a question one day. Kimberly, do you intend for your income to keep rising like it is? I said, well, that's always the plan. He goes, you need to buy a house. And I went, oh, what does that look like? So for a year, I went on a journey, my home buying journey, and I was sharing this because I think this is important. And there's not a lot of realtors out there who have gone through a home buying journey personally. And women are starting to make up a good portion of the home buyers. So sharing that journey, what I did over a year's period of time, preparing myself, having a pot of money set aside, paying that debt down, just being ready. And I bought very modestly. I was like, I had some things I was looking for. I didn't know. I was like, okay, I may be in this house 3 or 5 years. That's it. And bought way below, was ready. And there's still things that come up. I think back to that whole buying experience and some things in my gut that I questioned and just felt like, okay, they're saying it's okay, but I still think it's not. Should have probably listened to my gut. I'm trying to do a better
as far as
in the
things in the inspection report.
and just things I saw, but I handled it. There were things I wanted to do to the house, but yeah, 3 months after I closed on that house, unbeknownst to me, I became the legal guardian of a 4-year-old nephew and raised him in that house.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's a life changer.
You know, I bought in Lakewood. Lakewood's a great area, and I lived there for 20 years. Now I live in historic Springfield.
On staying on the subject of the home inspection, new construction.
Oh, yeah. You still, yeah. I do all the new construction I've done, no matter the price point, pre-drywall inspection, and a third-party inspection before we close. I love my builders. I love you. But there's always something. And here's a story. And this was with a military relocation, a high-ranking officer, the wife, and the husband was retired Marine Corps pilot. And they leaned on me a lot virtually. I was their eyes and ears. And this was a significant size home. And I remember I would show up and I would do different milestones. She was not allowed to travel because of COVID. So he would get down here as often as he could, and we would go through things. I remember the bedroom that was going to be their son's. I opened up the closet and I closed it and I opened it back up. And I called the project manager in there and I was like, what is this? I said, why is there duct work taking up 3/4 of this closet? I said, this is going to be their son's room. And hello. And the answer I got was, well, we haven't really built this home here before, this layout. And so, and I'm just like, okay. There were just so many things. And, I try to have grace in every situation. And this is when we're in COVID. People were buying, it fast and furious. And I don't think the builders could keep up. They couldn't get the help. But there was just so much. And, I mean, just the things on that one particular house.
Yeah.
Like the driveway, it was 3-car garage. And I'm looking at how they angled the pavers to come out of the furthest to the left. And I'm like, okay, if I have my car in this side of the garage, which I know they will, because it's one of the large bays, I'm going to have to try to angle my car over. And I asked the project manager, why is this just not straight? I'm like, we need pavers here. We need to make this a straight shot.
Common
out.
sense.
And then the response was, wow, we may not get those because those are hard to get right now. I was like, well, maybe we can find some in the neighborhood somewhere, but they took care of it at the end of the day. But the ductwork coming through that closet was not going to get changed.
Well, and you and I know you were the tree in the woods making noise, and it got fixed. How many times did it happen, and someone didn't notice it, or someone didn't feel another agent, or they didn't have agent representation in new home construction, which is another sin.
Well, here we go, Marine Corps eyes.
Yeah.
We had to be able in our uniforms to see the slightest little whatever. I see things and most people are like, what? And so when I do that I go, Marine Corps eyes are walking in. I said, watch out. Hand me that blue tape.
Well, you have the ability to look at a situation and visualize a car backing out of that garage and going, that ain't going to happen. You're not, and then, let alone have a larger vehicle like a truck or something or an SUV, which a lot of people drive, and you're just missing, your mirrors are just making it inside the, the thing. So any little blemish, but I had the one little thing to put a stamp on the new home construction. Someone told me one of the bathrooms wasn't even hooked up. So imagine you go through this entire build process. You're going through in your final inspection, or let alone you don't even go in and run the water in this bathroom, right? Oh yeah, the bathroom looks good, walk away, right? And then you go to turn the water on, it doesn't work. You already moved in the house. The builder's now trying to schedule guys to come in and fix that while you're already living in the house. And that's why you need to have an inspector. These guys are slapping these homes together right now.
Well, that's why you need a realtor before you.
Well, that's the start.
Before you
that's
step
number one.
Foot on a community, have a realtor, and if you have one, remember their name, who they work with. That always makes me scratch my head when somebody says, yes, I have a realtor. I'm like, awesome. Who are they with? And they cannot remember. That to me is so interesting.
Yeah.
But there was something else that came up that kind of flew out the window there with new construction. It'll fly back in here. Oh, because we're talking about military.
Yeah.
I learned this from that same build that we were discussing. I speak PCS. I've done bi-coastal moves, and you just don't pick up the phone and after the military move's been ordered and go, oh, hello, military mover. I need it to stop, and it's not happening, and we need to
delay.
Because it could take you months to get back on that schedule, and if your household goods are moving, they start moving. And they're going to come. And if the house isn't ready, you're going to have to figure out where those household goods are going to be stored. So in this instance, we got in a critical situation. The house was not going to be ready. It's COVID. The wife is stressed out enough, and her sister was living in an apartment not far away from this community, 2-bedroom, 2-bath. So her husband, and their young son are all huddled together while the house gets finished. But it escalated up to a statewide level, and it was like, well, will you pay for their household goods to be stored, this or that? So, now my question when I'm working with new construction and it is a military relocation, my first question to that builder is, I understand that things can happen in the build process that could cause this house not to be finished on time. Understanding that household goods start moving and they may need, they're going to need help. What can you do? What will you do? And little story, I won't say the builder, but if they're listening, they know who you are. You know who you are. I will be forever grateful because that happened. And when I asked that question, they didn't even stutter. They said, we'll make it right. And they did. They called me and said, we're not going to be ready. We have 2 other homes that will be ready. They can take their choice of which home, and we're not going to charge them anymore if it's more expensive. They put their money where their mouth is. And, of course, I knew which house they were going to choose.
So they had a spec home, or someone maybe had fallen through. So they basically had a spec home sitting there.
2 of them.
2 of them. And they let this family choose if they wanted to change their whole contract and go move over here to this other home. Yeah,
and they did. And it was the more expensive home and did not charge them anymore. And that will always stick with me because I know what they'll do. But that's the first question. Again, if I'm working with a military relo and it's new construction.
Right.
Because
that's an inspiring story actually right there, because as you and I know, back during 19, 20, 21, these builders didn't even want to talk to real estate agents. They were trying to find ways to keep you out. They didn't feel they needed you. And now where your inventory is growing, they have a lot of choices of homes to go to, although the builders still have their incentives. Now that they have been for the last year and a half, maybe 2 years now, really trying to entertain the real estate people, sponsoring your events and everything at your brokerage. But in that situation, obviously they calculated, they got the spec home, probably a deal fell through. What's it going to cost? Obviously we're paying taxes on it now. Like, we're better off putting this guy in here now and resell his house because choices were made now. Just someone made a decision, and that's what's inspiring.
The director of sales, she made the decision, and she's still with that builder. And whenever I see her, the site agent has moved on to a different builder, but I run into him from time to time, and I always hug him and just say thank you, because this could have gone so many different ways. But, I was recently...
And lucky, because a lot of the veterans, too, a lot of them, I can't say all of them because we know they realized their opportunity because they move so much.
Yeah.
They're not like so set on the house, and here they had an opportunity to actually probably get a little bit larger house, maybe a little better lot or whatever. And the situation was like, yeah, no problem, let's do it.
Yeah. And it was stressful enough. They had just had their first child. They're both naval officers. He was stationed at Kings Bay. She's at Mayport. And so my first question when there's a split base like that, who wants the shortest commute?
Right.
And then we'll go from there.
Yeah.
But so, being able to bring my expertise and my experiences to the table. But even beyond it being a military, I have tended to work with a lot of relocation clients. And I love it. Last year, all of my business was relocation, and so far
is it the Berkshire Hathaway? No, it's something you have been involved in.
They were, we do have a full relocation, a very robust Linda Lindenmoyer and her team, and they work with a lot of corporate. But no, this has just been referral, and it just is crazy. But I enjoy it because we have such a diverse region, 7 counties, and having my background in business and having, and that's something that's important to me to this day, is staying on top of what's going on, especially through the various different economic development initiatives, whether it be Jax USA Partnership, which represents a region, or going to the specific county EDCs and learning what's going on there. Another organization that I love is ULI, the Urban Land Institute. That's a higher level of conversation. I was involved with them back in my business journal days to really just learn, go deeper into what's driving real estate, whether it be residential, commercial, because even if it's just commercial, residential will follow the commercial.
So this is a great transition. Let's go back to your corporate world. And many guests that I've had on, the agents come from all, where they were stay-at-home moms, or they had corporate America type careers and that sort of thing. Tell us a little bit about, and share with the agents who may be on there, maybe someone's thinking about being a real estate agent, maybe he's in corporate America right now, some of the things that you experience, some of the skill traits, dealing with people. We talked about that with the Marine Corps, but how you've taken that and how it made it with that experience to transition to become a real estate agent.
Oh, geez. Well, in the 18 years I was at the Business Journal, and, I will just say it opened a lot of doors for me. I got exposed to a lot of organizations, to a lot of different size businesses and business leaders that most people don't get to meet and be around.
Right.
And helping those companies put together marketing plans that would help grow their business. And just much like Berkshire Hathaway HomeServices, the Business Journal, it's American City Business Journals, is all over. So it just taught me a lot of my client base was in real estate, whether it be commercial real estate, residential real estate. That's how I first met Linda Shearer. And it was Prudential Network Realty at that point. And architects, engineers, contractors, economic development. So I had the exposure to real estate and construction and the built environment. And when I made the conscious decision to leave the Business Journal, I had all kinds of people coming at me. Get your license, get your license, get your license. I saw what was happening in the economy. I saw, because I left at the very end of 2008. I had a young lady come to me. She always called me by my initials, KLW, come talk to me. She goes, I'm thinking about buying a house. And I got approved. And I went, I started asking her questions. I went back to my journey and I said, you have no business buying a house. I said, who is it you're working with? She told me, I was like, you have no business buying a house. You can't afford it. This is not. And I knew what was going to happen. And what I knew was going to happen, she went through foreclosure. And there was a conversation that was put on by the Business Journal and NAIOP shortly after I left. And it had different experts talking about what was happening in the financial industry and real estate. And I remember this female realtor at the time, I don't know if she's still with Holland tonight. She was the only female, and she was listening to these guys banter back and forth, and no one was really answering the question. She took the mic, and I love that, and she said, let me just tell you what was going on. These documents, these loan documents, signatures were missing. People were signing people's signatures that it wasn't the person that should be approving and looking at these documents. And people were getting loans that absolutely had no business getting loans. That's why we're in the mess we're in.
Yep,
and
exactly.
I was like, hey, you said it. And that's what happened. So I was like, no, I don't want to do that right now. And so what led me into real estate, if we want to go into that, is I was at First Coast News, and I had a death in my family, and it really shook me to my core, and I was offered a severance package, and I took it, and I sat there, and I literally asked myself a question. What does the last chapter of my professional career look like? This is it. This is the last chapter. I'm older than what most people think I am. That's okay. Good genes.
Yeah.
And so everything kept coming back to real estate. And my goal was commercial real estate, because there's an organization here that I'm a founding member of called CREW, Commercial Estate Women, that started when I was at the Business Journal. And that's an international group. And it was all about commercial real estate. And I actually went down to Orlando, interviewed with a company that I had the highest respect for, and COVID hit. And hiring was put to a pause. Well, I had been talking with a couple of people. You know, it's interesting when you get your license and all these people start calling you about interviewing, and the first thing I would listen to the rhetoric, and I'm like, why are you calling me? How did you get my name? Did you look at my LinkedIn profile? Because if you look at my LinkedIn profile, your conversation with me right now would be very different, and I would like to speak.
Doesn't that really just ticks me off?
I'm like, I'd like to speak. I said, if you're still interested in speaking with me, the next call should be from your broker. Yeah. And they don't know how to handle that. So I saw some interesting, but I'll do some shout outs. Holly Hayes, who was the managing broker of the Ponte Vedra Nocatee office at the time for Berkshire. She and I have been friends for years. I actually worked with her husband, Robert, at Gilbane. And she and I just, and I was like, I got to do something. I'm not going to not do my real estate. And I have the utmost respect for Linda Shearer and what she's been able to do in this industry. And so I just made the conscious decision. I was going to be with Holly. She's like, you live in historic Springfield. Do you really want to drive back and forth to Ponte Vedra every day? She goes, let me introduce you to Josh Cohen. So, that's the metro offices, which is San Marcos, San Jose, Avondale, Riverside, Ortega. And that's where I'm at. And
let's dig in and get some real rubber meets the road for the agents, because you brought up a couple different things. The great part is because your corporate experience, you got to know some of the players in the game. And so now you decide where you want to hang your brokerage. And to me, and I say this on every single show, maybe not directly, but it's brought up in one way, shape, or form or another, the choice of the brokerage you have can make or break you. Now you had a corporate career in dealing with a lot of people, and that was kind of what I was drawing out with that last question of, what did you bring to the table? Because you probably could have been successful with most any brokerage out there. You would have found a way to make your business work if you were that focused on, I'm going to make real estate work. Not everyone has that experience or confidence there. So that broker really could make or break with really maybe the first couple of weeks or months, how you get started. So when you walk in the office the first day, now you've got your license, you're signed up under Berkshire. What are some of the things that you didn't know about real estate? You knew people, but obviously I'm sure as every day in real estate, we learn something new, but really just like how to operate the business as an realtor. That's the right word.
Well, I think, and I'm going to answer your question, so don't think I'm not answering your question, but I think going through this whole process of making that decision of where I was going to land, I almost felt like, they call it recruitment nowadays, but when I was in college, rush, I felt like I was going through the rush of the real estate brokerages.
Right.
Who wants me? Do I want them? How do I feel? And it was really interesting. And that could be a whole nother episode, Tracy, in stories. And, I leaned into some people that I know. And, like I said, there's one girl in particular. I'll do a shout out to Wendy Patton. Wendy's at our Ponte Vedra office. Wendy actually worked for the Tampa Bay Business Journal for many of the same years I was at Jacksonville Business Journal, and we both we're in crew. We had the same verticals, and she, so I leaned into her. Another guy, Michael Starling. I've known Michael since 1991, back when he ran Bell South Mobility. He was the sales manager. So it was talking with people and getting their take, and then even people who aren't with Berkshire Hathaway. And the one thing that rang consistent, especially with the people not with Berkshire Hathaway, they hands down have the best training. Hands down. And the other thing that was important to me, you want the training, because a lot of agents don't have it, and they don't have the professionalism to back, to support them. I've been a small business owner, so I had that too. I know, because we are small business owners. We're 1099. And then the other thing that was important to me is we do operate as a single agency brokerage, which gives you the highest level of representation, confidentiality, and fiduciary responsibility. And as I say, it's what's best for you, not the transaction. And our brokers are there to support us. They do not sell. And that was important because you do need that support, especially if you are not business savvy, and some people are needier than others. I know I can be needy at times, but there's a lot going on, especially as of last year, with the lawsuit going from the NEFAR contract to the FARBAR contracts, just everything, and the things that you have to think about now. And it's it is. I was in a mastermind last week, and I heard a couple of very seasoned agents, because there were people of all levels in there, and they were like, "Where's our season? We don't understand this market. There is no season right now." And it's causing a lot of pause to very seasoned agents. And so when you find yourself in this type of change, because we're still in change, you've got to figure out, how am I going to be successful, stay successful, and help and I can call them clients because we're single agency. How am I going to best help my clients and make the best decisions? And also, there's a little bit of self in there. How can I, take care of my business? All
right. So on that description you gave there, which is kind of from trials and tribulations of a small business owner / real estate agent.
Oops.
How important was it for you to rely on, whether it was Josh, or I know you're part of a team? Berkshire Hathaway obviously has some very successful agents, and you talked about being at a mastermind recently. How has just surrounding yourself by those 5 people, right, really helped you in your business growth, that when you didn't know something, or like, how are we going to handle, I don't know if you may or may not have had this question, but as many agents did, was how are we going to handle this new buyer broker agreement, right? And all the, role play of when we bring it up on an open house. And you're right, I remember I was at a mastermind for that. You might have been there too, actually, for that one. And an argument ensued, or pseudo argument. But because technology's training, every day you're getting phone calls, whether it's from a lender or someone trying to sell you a widget. Oh, this is going to help you get more leads and all this other stuff. To have those people around you and to run ideas or get ideas from them to really move your business forward?
Oh, it's crucial, and that's part of the culture that they've created at Florida Network Realty is that collaboration. And just, have you had this situation happen? We have a weekly business meeting every Tuesday morning. Yes, I've missed my meeting today to be with you, Tracy. And we have training also. And I might sit in something more. I sit in something more than once, because you're always going to pick up something else. Yeah. And I always hope that somebody's going to make a comment and go, oh, light bulb moment, didn't know about that.
Take you off on a different page, yeah.
Because, I am a boomer. A boomer. I didn't come out holding the technology in the womb. I was holding it in the womb. Yeah. And so it's, I'm fortunate because of my experiences of being exposed to more current marketing platforms, but still it's, I'm not as fast as, the younger group, but you always should be learning and surrounding yourself with people that, especially that come from other brokerages into the one you're at, and asking the question. I think the biggest disruptor, I don't know if it really truly is a disruptor, but everybody wants to talk about technology. And I've seen people migrate to brokerages because of the technology. And, when it comes down to things at the end of the day, yes, it's great to have technology in any facet of your life. But when you're dealing with the largest purchase that someone's going to be making, it's an investment. Technology isn't what's going to drive that real estate transaction. There are so many things that I get involved with and dig into that if I didn't do that and didn't have the knowledge that I have and understand it a little more or know the people to turn to, they could fall apart, or I would have very unhappy people with me after they closed on a house and go, why didn't you tell me about this? And, there's always little surprises here and there. But at the end of the day, it's that communication, it's that personal interaction without the technology, and making sure, especially with that agent on the other side of the table. We were talking about that earlier. I love my iPhone. I love it, but it can also be an enemy, so to speak, because there are people I've never even met in person. And I will see them somewhere and I'll go, oh my goodness, I know your picture. I know that's you, but we've never met in person. Right. And I wanted to meet them in person, but for whatever reason, it didn't happen. Yeah. But it's just interesting that so many transactions go on where that the agent on either side have never met in person.
Right.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I brought that up many times as to how important it is to go, whether it is over here at Landmark or go to these and interact with agents from all over, because you never know who's going to be on the other side of the transaction. And then I'm sure you've dealt with agents. You're like, I hope I never do another transaction with that person again, because they were a hinder to what was going on, just a bad situation. But you were talking about technology, training and technology. You've said both of those words. I don't think you said them together, but I think, having talked to so many agents from so many different brokerages, and many of them, I went there because of training and technology. Right. Okay, well, let's take that actually off the table. Just like you just said, take that off the table, and what do you have left? Because that is really the real estate transaction. Yeah. Now, some of the training may overlie, like how to work with people, how to go to some trainings where someone's telling you, explaining to you how to, it's all about the relationships, right? It's the relationships, which is, where your referral business is coming from, is because you built relationships. Well, maybe you tweak that, or you read some personal development books or whatever, that part of training. But I think technology is like this satellite out here. And I think the really good agent doesn't want to have anything to do with it themselves, but they'll hire somebody to do all the back end stuff to make sure their people are being followed up, reminded, maybe, and I would put social media into that category as well, because I think you're right. The agents that are truly out there, I mean, truly killing it. I mean, we have a lot of good agents, don't get me wrong, but I mean, I'm talking like the ones that, are standing out, doing numbers unbelievable. They're spending all their time being front facing. They hire somebody to do their technology. They know what they want. Hey, we need to set up a follow-up campaign. We need to, I want every one of my people, that I'm working on or past clients to be contacted. Let's do a newsletter or whatever. Obviously, the ones that step out take that few minutes when they're driving that half an hour to that showing or whatever. They're on the phone, they're making a phone call and physically touching someone and interacting. But like you said, the training and technology, all of them. Now, would you agree? And you've probably, I don't know what's going on at Berkshire Hathaway. I'm sure you'll brag about it. But at a lot of brokerages, they have all this technology, but no one knows how to use it.
Well, they're doing a really good job of helping us understand it. Like I said, every Tuesday in our office, we have a business meeting, we do caravan, and then we do training. And for example, last week, the training topic was MC Plus, which is a marketing platform that our brokerage designed. And we can go in there, we can create flyers, social media, we can do a lot of stuff in there. And now they've amped it up. So making sure, like Josh will do a video explaining how to get in there. What are we doing? If you don't understand it, just come and ask me a question. It's, you can have the shiny new toys. That's great. Or like you said, you can hire people to help you with that. But it's necessary because not everybody has the extra money at the onset to go out and pay. So I feel very, what's the word I'm looking for? I hate when you have word and you're just like, it's just there. Thankful is the word.
Yeah.
That we have these platforms and they hear us. They have a thing called MOS. And once a month, this MOS meets, all the representatives from the different offices meet with our leadership to hear what we're having to say and can we make this happen. I think the biggest thing, was it 4 years ago, we got color printers in all the offices. Something simple as that. Every office got color printers. So, it's just, you have to slowly evolve, but I feel like the evolution in those areas for our brokerage is picking up a lot. But, it is about, there is so much more beyond the technology that's so important, the training. I mean, when you get hired on at Berkshire Hathaway, before you go out and set the world on fire, you go through Rising Star because they want to make sure you're prepared. Because you go through real estate school and you're drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah. To pass a multiple choice test.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
And
I just, I want to conclude on this point because I really want to just dig into your day-to-day business. But I know from a lending side, having worked for several lenders, from the real estate side, you guys are dealing with the same thing. They want to sell you on this technology, which there is tech needed. But I think if I was to create the optimal, whether it was a lender from a marketing standpoint to their soldiers, the loan officers, or from a real estate brokerage in their real estate agents. And I think they understand when you look at the really top people, I really love the way Melissa Ricks runs her business. I haven't talked to her in a while, but last time we spoke, and she has all these people doing all those things that keep someone locked in the office. So she can spend all the front time because she's really good at that, showing the house, spending time with the families, building those relationships. Because I think you've probably found in the industry, you maybe didn't realize this when you got in, when you're one-on-one with that buyer or seller, that's your billboard that you're hopefully painting that's going to last for years after the transaction because they're going to continue to refer. They're like a walking billboard out there. They're telling everyone, hey, if you're going to use an agent, you got to use Kimberly. You know what I'm saying? And because you spent enough time with them, instead of rushing off, and because what's the other thing is we're in front of our computers and they're like, hey, you need to be out in the field. You need to be out spending more time. Well, you gave me all this marketing technology. It takes time to learn all this stuff versus just having that one person in the office full time that's doing it for 20 people.
right.
And that's my little soapbox.
No, I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. No, it is. I mean, there are days that, and I have to make sure that people know I am part of a team. We're the Northeast Florida group. And, Nathan Gray and I came together About this time last year, we started formulating the idea, and then we added 3 more people before the end of the year, and we were very intentional about who these people are. And that's a conversation. We do a team meeting every Monday at 10 a.m., and once a month it's in person. The rest of the time it's virtual. And the conversation now is, okay, we've gotten to this point. It's been almost a year together. We need to tighten up some of this marketing infrastructure. And so we're going through that evolution right now. But we do have a lot of different things at our fingertips. It's learning them and trying to figure out which one's the best use of my time.
Right.
And, then you throw in social media. I have no problem getting in front of my phone and doing that, or a camera.
Right.
But it is time consuming, and you have to be thoughtful. And thank goodness ChatGPT, I feel very fortunate that we have a person within the HomeServices ecosystem. Rajiv is his name. He's a VP of Innovation and Technology for this brokerage. And I'm going to say the wrong one, but I think it's Long and Foster. And he came in, Ann King and Linda Shear brought him in last year in the 4th quarter, and we spent a half a day with him, and it was like mind-blowing at the rate of speed from when ChatGPT first hit, and it happened on a Thanksgiving Day, which was interesting for him to share that, to where it is now. But he created a mastermind, and I'm part of that. Anybody, it's free within Berkshire Hathaway HomeServices. So I'm like, it has helped me because how I approach that now is very different. And, I'm not going to let AI take over my life. I mean, there's a whole other conversation on that. But it can be very helpful, especially with writing copy for social media. I did it the other day. I had it right for my open house that I did this weekend. The copy was different for the Instagram platform, Facebook platform, and for just a regular marketing piece. And you still have to go in and massage it because it spit out some things. I was like, I don't know where you got that, but that is incorrect. Because it's just simply...
You have to tell it not to make things up.
Well, you can take the MLS number and just, that can be part of the question you're asking of what you want them to do for you or it. But it is helpful that way. I have an advertising background, so copywriting isn't foreign to me, but it is time consuming. But when you can have somebody just cut and paste that MLS number and put it in, and then you've given it the prompts, and that's important how you do that, and just see what it comes back with, and then keep massaging it. Don't take the first iteration at all. And even for me, for other things.
Well, let me just add something to that I found out recently, which makes total sense. Again, from this gentleman I was talking about before the show, AI is looking for AI. And when you're out there now and you're Googling, you're now getting this Gemini comes up.
Gemini,
because if you're kind of looking for like an answer to something, I forget what I asked it the other day. My wife's a real estate agent. We're doing the garage floor in this gentleman's house for a reason. And I was like, there was this chemical, and we had, well, does the floor have to be dry or can it be wet or whatever? So I asked Google, and it actually came back, in Gemini and gave that answer. But people are moving from Google to ChatGPT, amongst the other AI. Not ChatGPT is not the only AI platform out there. As they're doing their searches, they want answers, and that's why they like going to AI, because it gives you an answer versus giving you, Google was just giving you a bunch of advertisements, and then eventually it got to the links that you needed and so forth. But AI is looking for AI. So they're going in there and searching, and you're using these to create your captions, which I've been for about 6 months. Actually, I had a guest on and said, hey, you need to be using AI to create your captions and descriptions on YouTube, captions for Instagram. And that's what I've been doing. And it's getting better and better. And of course, it knows my format now. I don't have to give it all the prompts. I just say, hey, I need an IG caption for Kimberly. She's talking about Berkshire Hathaway.
It remembers you.
Yeah. And because I upload the transcript from every show. So it's already reading the show and knowing where that reel fit in, and then gives me some sort of caption, but then adds all the little extra things that we want, right? Berkshire Hathaway. And,
there's so much you can do with it. And that's what we did when Rajiv did our AI mastermind last week. That was the focus. And he said, these are all my little buttons I have. Copy them and use them and create your own. And I was like, gosh, okay, it's getting to know me. It's getting to know the things I ask. Kind of scary, but hey. But yeah, definitely it saves,
every once in a while I go into it.
It saves time. I mean, I had so I recently, the man in my life was officiating his son's wedding recently, and he was just kind of a little stuck on something. And I said, well, give me a minute here. So I'm in Chat GPT and I massaged it a little more. And I said, well, I think this is something, I'll read this to you and you tell me. And he was like, oh. And he said, can you send that to me? So I copied and pasted it and put in an email to him. It helped him get unstuck and where he was trying to go with it. So that to me is where AI can be very helpful, and it's time, because my time is money. And you mentioned this about Melissa. I hadn't seen her in a while, but I'm better in front of people. And my team, the Northeast Florida group, or I should say our team, because it's a collective, our team, they know that. I'm probably the most extroverted person on the team. But I shine in the openness and conversation. Yeah. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Yeah. I mean.
And I don't think that's going to change in real estate as long as we're on this earth. I don't know what's going to happen 50 years from now. But one, it cannot all be handled by a computer because, there's so many different variables. Maybe AI tones that down a little bit. I don't know. But the more forward facing people, we still got to have the face to face, pressing of the hands, that whole thing. And I don't see it going away, but what AI will do, it'll give us more time to do that.
It's the time. And I agree with that, but it's just, the new kid on the block. But at the end of the day, there's so much to learn about real estate and I think as an agent, if I could say one thing, just keep learning. Do CEs, even if you don't need the CE. I'm trying to get my GRI. I've taken the first pod of the 3, and I learned something that was very helpful for my father. I learned about a grant that he could get to retrofit his bathroom. Didn't know it existed, and it got done. And so little things that you'll learn and pick up, but every transaction's different. I always go like this. It's going into the Rolodex here because I need to remember that for something else. And I think that's the other thing, the collaboration, did you have this happen? What did you do? Do you have this? Like somebody yesterday, they needed to get a WDO inspection done pronto. The person that they normally use is booked up. So it's like, okay, try this person. So it's good to have that collaboration. It's great to have a broker who's really there for you and is accessible. I know there are some situations where the actual broker of the brokerage isn't here or is accessible. I think that's vitally important.
Well, I mean, I like to touch on that for the listeners out there. With the technology that's out there and things moving as fast as they can, as we're just talking about AI and everything, for a broker to stay out in front of, in the Marine Corps, right? The platoon sergeant's out in front. The broker's got to stay out in front of their people and continue to add value. And they may be doing great right now, but a year from now, if they start fading off, because there's so much pressure on them on a daily basis to be informed before their people, so they at least seem to be adding value to it. I know some of the technology things. I had a group on Gigi and Mike talking about Real, and obviously their way of doing it is they have a room of brokers that are fielding calls, but obviously they also try to spread the part of that knowledge base into their their main page that they can work off of, right? Everything's very easy and accessible to search. But that's a challenge for the leadership in real estate to stay out in front. They got to stay out in front of this ever-changing technology and then actually filter it to what the agent actually needs to know so they can go out and just do what they do.
Yeah, and I think, with the NAR lawsuit, the reality is Berkshire Hathaway, along with some other brokerages, had to pay a lot of money, and we had the largest part of that kitty, and we didn't have convention this year. And I've been to every convention because I find it important to connect with agents from elsewhere and learn.
Yeah.
And I will always go to convention. So what Ann and Linda did is we're going to create opportunities to make up for the fact we didn't have convention. So our theme this year is Thrive in 25. And the training is in pods, and they're consistent through each of the offices, and they're hitting on different themes. And we did a company-wide meeting. We do those quarterly. And the one we just had, they created it to be a mini convention, which I thought was brilliant, and I was thankful for that. So they know that they've got to step up and fill a void where there is a void, and they're listening to us with those Moss meetings. What do we need? You know, you can't do everything overnight. And
Do you think because of your 18 years in corporate America, it sounds like you thirst. Well, 18 years of business. We're not going to age you.
thirst.
Not going to age. But no, but you're, because of the structure of corporate America, and like they have their training departments and everything, right? A small boutique brokerage doesn't have that. Now, Berkshire Hathaway, they're working on a national basis, so they have resources, let alone, you know, their agents, but then they people, I'm sure, to just do training. That's what they do, create training modules. But you thrive in that office. You know, you got your team, which I imagine over years, you probably worked in little teams on different projects or whatever. But having those people that were not that far away, they're in the hallway, you're walking by the cooler together, right? That whole thing. Right. You thrive in that. So I'm just thinking, as someone who's listening right now, who thinking of what brokerage to go with, maybe, Berkshire Hathaway being very collaborative, being very obviously highly professional group of people. There's a lot of people doing a lot of great business there, and there's just a synergy in that office, and that you thrive from that.
I do, and I see and I think it's important for me, it's not as necessary as it used to be in my younger career life. A lot of my business gets done at my home office. Yes, I have a desk sitting in the Avondale office, but people go, well, what office are you in? I said, I have a key fob that opens every office. I go wherever I need to be. I might be out in Ponte Vedra.
Yeah, if you need to go type up a contract or whatever.
I'm going to be wherever I need to be. And that's the beauty of that. Now we've opened up offices down in Palm Coast. So it is that, because I think you have to learn. You'll listen to different things on social media. They're like, find an agent, find a mentor. Well, you can't do that if you're not. Now, there's a lot of different collaborative masterminds that are out there that are agency agnostic. And I go to those. I am a member of Market Distillery. Alex is brilliant. And what he's doing now for us, the members, is wonderful. And, you just have to find those areas that it makes sense. I mean, I got into a situation where I was putting down an interesting amount of money on a monthly basis, and it was an epic fail. And just because
to get information that he provides,
no leads.
A lead gen,
and by a platform that's still out there in a little bit of a different iteration, and it was awful. And I just know, because I know I do in my business background, I knew how to frame the conversation to get out of that contract. And I was able to, and actually got some money back. But I've seen that fail. And there's a lot of them out there, and they come at us fast and furious on a daily basis.
Let me, because being around all these top pretty people in there, because you like to interact in the office and beat these things, you probably, I'm going to guess, you probably actually didn't ask others about this service before you jumped into it and realized it. But now, before you do it, you probably ask a bunch of other real estate. Anybody using this?
Actually, it was something that was at a different level, a partnership that our brokerage went into with them. And I did that. And then I got a phone call and said, oh, we have this heightened level concierge level. Ooh,
shiny.
and it is going to
really
do
shiny.
this for you and that for you. And Kimberly, don't you want that? And I guess I said I do. It was awful. I mean, I kept complaining the leads. And here's the kicker. They did away with it and never let me know. And I was like,
still paying for it.
It picked up the phone and like, oh, well, we did away with that at the beginning of the year. And I was like, well, then why am I paying for it? Well, you should have gotten a call or an email. And I said, listen, I wouldn't have known that. And I was like, I have emails that I probably haven't read yet. So I was like, I did the search. I said, there is absolutely nothing. I said, there is no call that I ever got. And I was like, how can you be charging me? And this is what's happened and this and that. And again, what would I call their mothership? Runs ads, on all of the different media platforms. They're out there. They're at everybody's conventions. And every time I see them, I'm like, let me tell you my story and what happened. And they all just like go, oh, maybe you need to move on. And I'm like, okay. But so it made me skittish to do that. And so I will never plop that kind of money down again anytime soon. But as I said, our team, the Northeast Florida Group, and I have to do a shout out to Nathan Gray, Amanda Rodriguez, Margaret Fishback, and Nathan Bussey. And that's a conversation we're having now, that do we each, at a nominal investment, create this monthly kitty? And these are the things that we will do. And we will be strategic. We will have a plan, but we just feel like we're at that point now because we've been working on all of our different packets for buyers, for sellers, expired, FSBO, getting some team-centric platforms up on social media, Canva, what's everything going to look like? And then, oh, by the way, you have your own little gig that, your own little essence that's out there. And so it's a good group.
Yeah.
And we are there to help each other. And that's what a team should be, is to help each other.
Right.
And not all teams operate the same, but it's, at the end of the day, what I have learned about it is the broker's going to set the tone, find out if that broker sells or not, find out what training is available to you. If there isn't a robust training platform in that brokerage, find the successful people. And it may take a few times to find that person that you jive with, but learn from him or her. Shadow open houses, do open houses, get out.
You're probably leading actually into my next question. So let me premise that. But I want to say something right before that. Because, again, you spent years in corporate America. I did as well. Well, of course, now almost 20 years now. September will be 20 years in the mortgage business. But you got to go to these brokers, if you were talking about real estate specifically, and ask the agents who you can't. The broker's going to tell you all things are funny. My first question is, when you have a meeting, and I'm just, for any broker, you have a meeting, is there actually an agenda with an accomplished goal? They're actually going to learn something, because your time is very valuable. And I guarantee you 75% of the pseudo sales meetings that are happening right now, which people stop going to, is because there's no agenda, no true, hey, this is cutting edge learning. You should get to know. So someone's leaving with a nugget. Yep. Maybe it's about the training, maybe about this thing and whether or not you should use it or not. What's the pluses and positives and negatives about it? But I find so many sales managers out there that really aren't prepared. They're saying, hey, yeah, we have a meeting on Tuesday morning, and at 10 o'clock at 9:30 they start kind of whipping together a couple ideas and maybe scratch them down on a piece of paper.
No. There is.
Yeah, that's what you got to find a brokerage like Berkshire Hathaway. Because I know Josh is. He didn't get to the level he's at running all the, because you're going to bring people in. They've got to leave with some substance. Right. They've got to say they got something from that. Right. You maybe teach 10 things and maybe they walk away with one or two things a day. That's a win, right? That they might use. So
yeah, he does a Monday motivation. and he starts the week before, after probably around Wednesday, what the theme of the next business meeting is going to be, if we're going to have special guests, this and that, little market tidbits. We have our meeting. You can be there in person or virtual. Sometimes we've been doing more on site at somebody's listing, and we'll collaborate with one or two other of our offices. And that's always fun. And then we get a recap sent to us. And we know what the training's going to be, and it's all based on Thrive in 25. We know what's going to be on Caravan the day before. And then at the end of the week on Friday, he does a wrap up. And, and so there's constant touch points. But
he's thinking and he's planning,
Yes.
and he's not just winging it, which
Correct.
I think of too many are doing. And I think as an agent coming in, because here's my question. Right now, there's some agents that are doing actually fairly well in the current market. Even with there's people with a lot of listings, but there's some are slowly moving. But anyway, some are actually doing better than they have in last year. But there's as we know, there's 70-something% of the agents last year didn't even do a deal. What would be 2 or 3 things that you would recommend to an agent who maybe might be struggling right now? Maybe what they should need to reach deep and maybe think about doing, if they're not already doing, to hopefully change that.
What is your why? Why are you doing this? Why did you even do that? Because you got to understand your why. That's always hard to answer.
Yep.
And
I hate that question, actually, personally. But
why? Well, what's your why?
Right.
And I know what my why is and why I'm doing real estate right now. It's very clear. And it all makes sense. Now I know why people wanted me to do it years ago. It wasn't time. And ask, how are you going to support me? What can I expect? And where's my growth potential here? And find out where they, and just ask questions. You may know somebody that personally or professionally that knows people in other brokerages that say, hey, do you know somebody in real estate that I can lean on? Like I know this sounds funny. My former gynecologist, she retired. I wish she would come back. She called me. She said, my niece is relocating down here with her family from Chicago. And she is going to get her real estate license. And I would love for her to chat with you. And Amanda is the Amanda Rodriguez on our team, and she is part of my team build. And, I appreciated it. And, it's just because this business is not for the faint of heart. This isn't, I can go do this and have fun, and I can go do my country club stuff and then come do this a little bit and that. You've got to treat this like a business. And I think how is the tone being set by that broker? Are they encouraging you to be in the office? Is there collaboration going on? There's just so many different factors. And, there are great brokers out there, but, I can't say enough about Josh Cohen. I can't say enough about just Berkshire Hathaway HomeServices, Florida Network Realty. And then you say the Northeast Florida Group.
Yeah.
And it's perception is reality. And it's, there's a lot of new shiny kids on the block of brokerages out there. Is it bougie? Is it, are we having parties and this and that? I will tell you, we're not old stodgy people at Berkshire Hathaway HomeServices, Florida Network Realty. We have fun. We know how to have fun. And I've noticed that the dynamics of the agents coming in is from all walks of life. Let's just put it that way. And I like that. And because it can't be the same old. And it's, the brand has a certain panache to it. And, for some people, they hear Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, oh, those are the really expensive homes. That's all they do. That is not true
like
at
one
all.
Sotheby's or they have the
Well,
Compass
yeah,
hat. They all kind of
we
have
do.
that reputation.
We are the leader and I'll just say this, we are the leader in the market in luxury. And there's certain segments of the market that we dominate. But like I tell people, my little tagline I share is wherever you are in your real estate journey, we're here to help. And I'm here to help. And because, I think my least expensive transaction was a lot in Mandarin, and I know it sold for like $100 and something thousand. That was my smallest transaction. So, yeah, and I think about when I bought my house in Lakewood, I bought that house for $80,000. And I'm like, I couldn't buy that house today. And I see what the prices are, and I'm like, this is so interesting to me. But yeah, it's, I'm always open to chatting with people. I like to play golf. I don't get to play as much, but there's an organization called LEGS, Ladies Executive Golf Society, that started here by Jillian Johnson, and it's like sprung up all over the United States. And they launched a mentorship program. I'm actually mentoring another real estate agent who's in a totally different brokerage in Scottsdale, Arizona. And it's been fun. And, she's a little firecracker. And I said something to her. I said, if you ever want to consider Berkshire Hathaway, you might want to have that conversation. I can set that up for you, because she's thriving. She's desiring more. And she will not get that from the brokerage that she's at right now. Yeah. And I think that's, another thing is, if you're new, if you've gone through a full year or a couple of years and you just are floundering and you just aren't sure, go out and talk to different brokers. And see.
Well, really, as brokers would you agree more of the agents that are doing the business? I think that's more important. I don't think the broker is always the answer, because you're going to get a crapshoot there. At least you can go and say, hey, these are, like listen to the Real Estate Excellence podcast. Say, hey, who's been on the Real Estate Excellence podcast? They're top producers. Let me go pick a few of those and actually go and have coffee with them at lunch.
And have coffee with them, because I think you would be surprised.
They've been there.
And I think it's important to find somebody who might be in the same stage of life or started off at the same stage of life that you're in. And what did they do? What made them so successful? Did somebody give them a chance? I'm having that conversation with somebody right now on a listing. And I said, you need to give me a chance. I know I can do this. And just because I haven't sold at that exact price point doesn't mean I cannot do it. You look at what I've done, but some people have blinders on and they think, oh, these are the only people that
they're in LA.
Well, they think these are the only people that can do it. Funny little thing. I think you'll find this funny. So there's a husband and wife with our Beverly Hills Berkshire Hathaway HomeServices, and they actually run their new construction division. And when I first met them, I said, okay, I just have to ask. The Oppenheim group, all of those people out there that we see on reality TV, I said, do you ever interact with them? I said, is it really like that? And they started laughing. They go, we see these people all the time. And no, how you see them is strictly for TV. That is not how they dress. That is not how they're made up. And they're actually pretty down-to-earth people. It's just for TV. So you don't think that. No. And so I had to ask them that.
No, they make it look like they play basketball in their 6-inch high heels.
I'm like, come on now.
Or go running. Kimberly, I appreciate you coming on today. Really, really good show. I think there's a lot of information there. We talked a lot about Berkshire Hathaway, but it's obviously the pool you jumped into, you're thriving in. And that's, I think, the bottom line, if we conclude this episode, is you find the brokerage that does business the way you can thrive in, that you feel you want to get up every morning. And there's obviously the people to rely on, people who challenge you, hold you accountable, etc., and help you move the needle. Yep. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Tracy.
No problem.
All right. Bye.
This may be it for today's episode of Real Estate Excellence, but we both know your pursuit of excellence doesn't stop here. To connect with the best of the best and really take your skills to the next level, join our community by visiting TracyHayesPodcast.com, where you'll meet more like-minded individuals looking to expand their inner circle and their personal experience. That's available at TracyHayesPodcast.com.